Jonny, we can't escape one another.
Look at this.
The irony that we're doing this in London 3 days after you're off in Edinburgh for 3 days is not lost on me, but here we are. How have the past couple of days training been?
Great. We had a lot of runs up in Edinburgh, up in the Highlands. Is it Highlands? No, it wasn't the Highlands. The Lochs.
For anyone outside of Scotland, we'll call it the Highlands generally, but the Trossachs.
The Trossachs. In my mind, it's the Highlands. It's the highest I've ever been in the United Kingdom.
Keep
so
it that way.
We'll take it that. For context, I've just been up in Edinburgh for the last 6 days, away with yourselves up in the Trossachs.
The Trossachs, Arica.
Okay,
Arica, yeah.
But the Lochs or lakes for non-Scottish people. And then we hit a decent run 2 days ago.
It was class.
Beautiful weather. I thought Scotland was just rain and whiskey. It turns out there's so much more when it's sunny.
Rain, whiskey, and haggis.
And haggis, sorry.
There we go. There's the big three. The big three. But just talk us through what you're training for at the moment, because I was very much enjoyed the run that we had on Wednesday as part of your second biggest week. Am I right in saying at this point? We're ramping into a big one next week. When is peak week planned for?
Peak week is planned for 3 weeks' time.
Okay.
So context at the moment, I'm deep into a big training block for big challenge, running to all the capitals of the UK and Ireland. So starting on the 12th of September in Edinburgh, over to Belfast, Dublin, Cardiff and London. So 5 capitals, 940k, 10 days. The 10 days bit still gets me.
Yeah. Try not to think about that detail too much, because I know it's planned rigidly. We were going to go over to Stranraer and sort of plan things out there, but you're now on B roads for the most part, aren't you?
Yeah.
Which means that trails, elevation, RV access, all those logistical considerations are under control.
100%.
Very exciting indeed. And I know we discussed this last time you were on, which people can go back and listen to, but what is the context around why you are doing this?
So I'm an ambassador for the charity Calm. They're campaigning against Living Miserably, who are a suicide prevention charity. I raised money from last year running the London Underground, raised £30,000. Suicide Prevention Day, 10th of September. Suicide Prevention Month is September. And Calm making a massive push this year. I was looking at ways to, again, bring together running, my absolute passion, running community, with causes that matter to me. And I had this idea of, looking at runs between cities has always fascinated me. So I know we've talked a bit about this, Edinburgh, London. There's
lots there.
There's lots there.
Yeah.
Keep that quiet. I've recently ran the speed project from LA to Las Vegas, and there's something really cool about traveling to 2 places that you would generally never run between. And I think that there's a fascination between that, because again, like it's just a fascinating thing. Especially, I just travelled back on the train from Edinburgh to London the other day, thinking, oh god, I've got to run a lot further than this, and fit in 3 other capital cities in between it. So for me, it's an exciting challenge. It's a great way to connect with people in each of those cities, run with people in those cities, and again, it's the amount of people I met during the last year's challenge of running the Underground. How many people came out? How many people who'd never really ran before came out and supported it? And that element of bringing people together through a shared passion, a shared interest. And, I was blown away by how many people just came through to be involved with that. So I thought, what's a great way of doing that, but on a bigger scale? How can we do that? We're outside of London. The UK is far more than just London. And I've had this idea and put it together. And again, before routing it properly, was like, what's the rough distance between each of these places? Okay, let's put a marker on 10 days. And then I actually routed it and realised it's a lot further. But I had
stuck with the 10 days.
I had 10 days in my head at that point. So I was like, well, I've said it to myself now, so we'll go from there. So, with a goal to raise £100,000 for Calm, which we are on the way to doing.
Fantastic. What's the starting point that we're at right now? Obviously, people will start donating once they see you suffering, but where are we now?
How does it? I think we're 4K in so far.
Excellent.
So kicking it off there.
Good
I thought, you know what? Best way to do it, start with a donation myself. So £1,000 in myself, money where my mouth is. You got to start somewhere. I thought, let's start with that one.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, it takes away that immediate pressure of having it sit at 0 for too long as well.
Yeah, thank God. So luckily, never got some support. But I appreciate people want to wait until the challenge underway, or you're near enough completing it. So I've seen other people's fundraising on challenges before. People generally donate as you're finishing because I want to make sure you've done it before, which is fair enough. I can understand that. But it's one of those things that for anyone who is raising money for any challenge, don't get disheartened when the donations will come as you're doing it, as you're making your way through. So,
in terms of attacking this one, it's very different in terms of the psychology, support, and general vibe day to day. You've got the cities, which are going to be high energy. There's going to be a lot going on. You've got people around you. You've got all those community elements that you've done a phenomenal job of really consolidating here in London and will be doing in other cities. But when you're running London Underground, every day you had support, you had interaction, you had words of wisdom, words of support, people with carbon shoes clip-clopping behind you, all of these things. Whereas for the most part, you are going to be with your support team on unfamiliar roads, plodding away. How have you adjusted your prep with that in mind from a sort of psychological point of view?
So what I wanted to do during training for this was to spend as much time on the routes as possible. So getting out of London, getting to the place I'm going to be running in, or just places that are unfamiliar. So every other week or so, I've been either in Wales, in Scotland, out in the countryside, running routes I've never ran before, and also running on quite suspect road, I guess, like not the easiest of terrain to go on. Running on B roads, there's a few times I have to run on A roads. It requires a certain level of like nous about yourself to be like, right, there are cars going to be flying past me here. And that is something that is sort of preying on myself at the moment. Thinking, there's going to be days where I'm running on pretty busy roads in that unfamiliar territory. No one bar my team around me on those sections to sort of look out for it. But it's very different. With the London Underground, there was not a single moment I didn't have someone join in from the public who was, had the tracking device on me, and people could find where I was. It's really easy to get to me because every couple of minutes I'd run past a tube station, so people could join me for a small section. This one, obviously, people can come find me and join me wherever they want to, but logistically, it's quite a lot harder to get to me on those places. Whereas in the cities, obviously, it's great, and that's a real high energy moment. Running through each of these cities or each of these capitals with people who want to come out and join. But yeah, there's a big difference. So I've spent a lot more time running on my own. I think running in London's great because there's so many people who want to run. Whether I just go out on my own, I end up running into people I know, or running into people that I'd roughly run the same sort of route. Running middle of nowhere does require a certain different mindset when you're on your own doing these things, especially in the big weeks. Like, this week, obviously, I ran with yourself 2 days ago in Scotland. The previous 2 days were solo on unfamiliar territory, and also it wasn't too anyway with that. I ran to Livingston, the place.
It's basically Scotland's Milton Keynes.
Just roundabouts.
Yeah,
roundabouts.
Has Milton Keynes got a shopping centre? A disappointing shopping centre? Yep.
Big one, but
disappointing. Scotland's Milton Keynes.
There we are, Scotland's Milton Keynes. Because that's the first 25k of the route to Stranraer, which is day 1, day 2. And it was just a case of very familiar road. I'm following the map, the route I've devised for myself on Strava, and whatever the route is, we just have to go through it. Whether or not it's because lots of people message me after being like, "Oh, you should have ran the canal. The canal's really nice."
Yeah.
I'm like, I am trying to go the fastest way possible. The canal might be lovely, but I need to kind of get used to like, how do you deal with roads where there's no path, you're running on the road and it's tight bends, so cars could whiz around the corner. Like, just getting used to kind of standing out a little bit, putting your arm out so people can see you before it's too late. So that adds another element to it, another way of preparing for it. But also, like, it's when there's people constantly watching you, joining you in, it does kind of carry you forward a little bit. There's going to be like 90% of this run is going to be middle of nowhere. No one's around. You just got to get moving. And logistically different. With the London Underground, I'd finish a day, I would jump on the tube and just go home, sleep in my own bed, have my own kitchen, have everything I need at home, and we just pack the bags in the morning and go out. Obviously, this time I can't stay at home, so it's in an RV. That's everything we need has to be in that RV for the whole time. And that's also where we're going to be sleeping, eating, everything's going on, not just me, but the crew. And logistically, that completely changes things because, we can't just go, oh, we need this. Okay, we'll grab it here. It's like, we kind of need to have that when we start. So that means organizational side is massive compared to it was before. And also like that RV's got to work. We're going to make sure that, if anything happens to the RV, that kind of screws us over as well. So we have to be really conscious of this. So planning wise, it's taken a lot more time, effort and energy. And also training for this year is significantly higher. So as you know, the more you train, the more you need to rest and recover. And also the less energy you have to spend planning, training, all this kind of stuff. So yeah.
How has your attitude to London changed since we last spoke? I think we would have spoken, it was cold. It was definitely cold. So was it
December?
December?
Yeah,
December. So December last year was when we did round 1 of this. And you were semi fresh off the London Underground, but
yeah.
You were very much immersive in London there. You lived more centrally, you're a bit out of town now, and you've spent a lot of time in rural other parts of the UK and reminded yourself, as I think is often good to do, that the UK is not just London. Mm-hmm. I mean, the economy kind of is, but we'll move past that. And I sense that your attitude to the city as a whole and how you interact with it has changed slightly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still very London-based. I mean, I live in London, just the different side of town now, but it's more a case of there's a lot. London's great. Don't get me wrong. I love London. I love being based here, but I think London is very easy to get caught up in a lot of things, especially with the running scene here. It's it's changing and it's evolving a lot faster than it does at any other parts of the country. I've got my base here, my run club here, and I absolutely love it. But at the same time, it's not something to get overly consumed by, and understand that there are other parts of the UK. And especially for running purposes, like, I found that I've enjoyed running in London less, especially during these hotter periods of the year. That's why I enjoyed so much last week going to Scotland. It was awesome. It was 30 degrees in London. It was 20 degrees in Scotland. I know which temperature I'd rather run in. But yeah, no, it's given me, it's nice to take time out of London, especially during training, because there's less distractions. I found it when I'm in London, like I'll use yesterday as a good example. First day back in London, I was like, okay, I got 16K in the cards. I got caught up with calls, emails, just errands and admin and things to do. So the next thing you know is 7 p.m. at night. I was like, I still need to get 16K done. Whereas when I'm in Scotland, I just wake up, have breakfast, go out of bed and just go run. And the things just ticked off a lot easier than I'd do with admin later. So it's London's great, but it's also got a lot of distractions in it, which I think if you're training for something really specific where you need to be ultra focused, can get in the way a bit.
Yep.
So I think taking yourself out of those situations, taking yourself away from places of great distractions, is really key. My friends aren't asking me to go to the pub on a Friday night when I'm not in London. So there's definitely
I think if anyone in London is training for a big event, or anyone in a major city is training for a big event, there is always merit to trying to book a weekend that acts as a bit of a milestone. Because if you're training for an Ironman, you'll always have your big peak week. You might have your 100-mile ride. You might even do a sort of full distance swim, 180K bike, and then a long run Friday, Saturday, Sunday, something like that. If you can always do it in the terrain or area you're going to be doing your actual race, fantastic. But if you're doing something abroad, that will be challenging or very expensive, either or. But I think there's a huge amount of merit to just really having the milestone and separation away from the big city to be able to work towards. Even for me up in Edinburgh, whenever I've been training for the Keltman or Extreme Triathlons, going up to arse end of nowhere in Scotland, booking somewhere for the sole purpose of I'm doing these big 3 training sessions, it just completely lazies you in and takes you away from all those distractions, as you said, which I think is a lesson for anyone that's training for big events in London, is something to try and map into your training process, because training isn't as binary as numbers on the screen and data that you sort of present back to a coach or you're reviewing yourself. It's the human being, the ambition, the desire, the fire in the belly that you wake up in the morning. And the best way to manipulate that is by playing with the variables that you can control, which you've definitely been doing this prep, haven't you?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think it's easy to get caught in a trap when you've trained for ultras, different races, different challenges, to go, oh, all I need to do is X, Y, and Z in training. You forget that actually, no, you need to take yourself away to really hone in what's about to happen. I think once you've done a couple of different challenges and you put yourself into those deep waters a few times, you're no longer naive when you go into them. I think last year I was maybe a little bit naive, going, this will be fun, just running, an ultra day and running the whole network. And obviously when you're in it, you're like, oh, this is actually really pretty fucking hard. Whereas when now knowing that and doing various different races, challenges, I'm now very aware of how difficult this is going to be, how hard this is going to be. 90 plus Ks a day continuously is a massive, massive ask. And that's not just a physical ask, it's a mental ask. So I think taking yourself out where you can solely focus on the mentality side of it. Even at the moment, a lot of the training we're doing is continuous, long run after long run after long, just to get in that mindset of this is going to happen every single day, and really honing in on that and understanding the mindset you need to be in order to do that, in order to turn up each day being like, no matter what, we're starting now, we're running now, because it's going to be 12 plus hour days again and again and again and again. Just got to lock in for those things. So that's why I think taking yourself out to really acknowledge that. Whereas if I'm in London, I'm thinking, okay, after this run, what we've got to do here, we'll do here. When you take yourself out of the situation, you can just go, right, let's just spend a good hour or two afterwards going through, how did that feel? Where's my head at? And actually giving yourself the space to really think deeper as to where I need to get to in order to achieve this. And that's really important, because that reflective time is just as important as the doing time, the training time. Because again, you could be the fittest person in the world or your fittest level you can get to. If your head's not in the right space for a big challenge, it's not going to go well.
Yep. I can testify to that a little bit with the 250 for me. I got through it, but I didn't go into it in the headspace that I wanted to be in, because I just couldn't juggle all the variables to the sort of level that I wanted to. And I think a big mistake that I made was almost, for convenience sake, starting from near the office, just because it just made it feel like a training session, which meant for the first 6 or 7 hours, I kind of hadn't really switched on to the fact, like, oh, fuck, this is the thing. You've arrived at the thing.
Made it.
So that was a big lesson, whereby we were kind of looking. I was very much looking throughout that sort of 6-month training prep period, juggling a lot of things, more so than usual. And I just, reflecting upon it, I knew I wasn't in the right headspace going into it. I knew it was going to be tougher because of that. Got through it, but was I a little bit more reserved, comfortable in my rest periods that could have been 10 minutes that turned into 25, 30? all these sort of things I've reflected on. I think it was just a case of reinforcing your point there. You need to make sure that you put yourself in the right headspace to do the big thing. Otherwise, the big thing might not be what you desired it to be in the first place. And at the end of the day, a lot of people doing big challenges in whatever city they're in, whether it's for charity, whether it's for themselves, are doing it non-professionally, recreationally. So you might as well fucking enjoy it. That's the whole point, isn't it?
You've got to find the enjoyment in it. It was, I think as well, when you bog yourself down in big training weeks and you've got other responsibilities in life, it's sometimes quite hard to just remember you're supposed to enjoy this. You're choosing to do this. There has to be an element of enjoyment, of fun, whether that's that type 2 fun where, it's going to suck, but, afterwards you're going to feel great for it. If you don't get something out of it on a personal level, it can be a bit deflating. A friend of mine called me yesterday. I'll give him a shout out for this one because it was actually really good. He was he just said I feel like you're going through at the moment with training and everything. I just want to let you know, like, do me one favor next week, do something on top of your training that's going to make next week 10% more fun. And he called me mid-run on this as well. I was like, that kind of put me in a bit of a mind space.
Yeah.
Okay, what's a fun way I can add something to next week rather than just being like, I've got 150k to run plus some other training to do plus bike work plus gym. What's one thing I can do to make next week a little bit more fun, to look through it and actually start to enjoy the process a bit more. I mean, I talk a lot about enjoying training. I'm someone who generally enjoys training. Whether I've got something to train for or just as a day-to-day tool for my own self-preservation and enjoyment, I like to train. I think sometimes when you've got a massive amount of pressure to train for something and you need to see progression, you need to see results, and maybe they don't come as you like them, it can weigh down a little bit. And then all of a sudden, training isn't this thing you enjoy. It's this thing you kind of have to do, and almost like a boxing exercise. In reality, like, I got into this because I enjoy training. That's how I like to spend a lot of my time. It's allowed me to meet some amazing people, understand myself better, improve myself in many different ways I never thought I could. But I think reminding yourself that there has to be a level of enjoyment towards it. I think the deeper, earlier parts of my training were really fun, and then dealing with fatigue issues and all this stuff, training became almost like a chore, and giving myself a bit more, just give myself the allowance to actually enjoy it.
Yep.
I think sometimes we can all get a little bit serious in our training, and it's good to take the training seriously, but not necessarily take ourselves too seriously within that. I think it's okay to have fun with it whilst you're doing it. Otherwise, it can become a bit noisy. It can become a bit, black and white filter on Instagram, top off training, some heavier music and some caps on the screen. It's not, I understand that it's not that serious.
Yep.
Take it seriously, but it's not that serious.
Well, that'll be a lesson to all. Call your mates. Call your mates. That seems to be the thing, because that's probably picked you up yesterday and will carry you through the rest of the week, won't it?
100%. I think that's an element of I've taken myself away from a lot of people for training purposes, but also it's important to remember, like, you've got friends for a reason.
Yep.
And
so what are you doing next week? What's the thing going to be? What's the 10% going to be?
You know what it is? I've been quite strict with what I've been eating, and especially finishing training, coming back and eating, X amount of protein, X amount of carbs straight away, and really being on top of that. I'm just going to, after each run, find somewhere different to eat.
Cool.
Just plan in the morning where we're going to finish the run. Okay, where we're going to go for food afterwards, and just have give myself that an hour of refueling, something fun, something I enjoy.
Yep.
I mean, I run 150k next week, so I can kind of eat most.
You'll balance the books, yeah.
The books will be balanced in that one there. I'll find it very difficult to gain weight next week. So, I'm just going to do that, and that's something I can do there, and try and line up with friends there as well. So try and find a way to do that one, and just actually have something to look forward to throughout that process, rather than just being, okay, we've got to go out and run another 30k today, and then afterwards you've got to get back into work, got to go do this, and this. It's like, let's find a way to actually increase the enjoyment rate level, because sure you understand, when you're training these big things, by the time it comes to 7, 8 p.m, you're tired. The idea of going out for a dinner is just like, yeah. It's kind of the last thing you want to do in the evening. You just want to think, right, let's start getting in the process of bed. My sleep is up to 9, 10 hours a night now. So that's got to come from somewhere. It can't come from the morning, so it's got to come from the evening. So, I've got to find whatever that fun bit of enjoyment is earlier in the day. And, I'd much rather be at home in the evening, catching up on whatever work bits I need to do then, rather than doing it early in the day.
So on the topic of enjoyment and the fruits of that call from your friend, Campaign Against Living Miserably, suicide prevention, the importance of those relationships, and essentially what the message of the project is going to be. If you could distill it down, what do you want the message of this project to be? Is it different to last time?
I think there's an element of difference to last time. Last time was doing my best to sort of bring people together through running, because it was such a London focused thing, connecting people from different areas of London, different communities to cross over, meet each other and connect with that. And that was achieved. We did that. This is why I'm so, proud of what we managed to achieve in that. Whereas this one is, we are bigger than our problems. When we connect with each other. And I think that's a huge element. So that's why wanting to go from city to city, wanting to get as many people together in each of those cities to run with each other, connect through this, and understand that we all face problems in life. We all face challenges in life, but it's to remember that we are bigger and we are better than our challenges, and we are more than that, especially when we come together. So, I think the importance of good friendships, good connections, and actually, right now we're going through not just a cost of living crisis, but there's a loneliness crisis. People have never felt more alone than they do now, and a lot of people have a lack of strong friendships and connections. And I think it's really important to remember that actually, like any relationship, friendships take work, take effort, and take a level of vulnerability that I think in this day and age, people may be a little bit too shy or withdrawn to be able to connect to. So for me, it's bringing that to the forefront. It's showing that when you work with people, when you connect with people, it makes life so much easier. When you've got challenges you're facing and you bring people together through helping the challenges. Like I always look at whenever my friends are going through difficult times and they speak to me about it, I feel good about that. I feel good that they've come to me for that. And also, I've had it times when friends have gone through things, they haven't spoke to me about it, and I'm a bit like, I wish you'd have talked to me about it. I wish you'd have brought me into whatever you were facing. As a friend, I feel almost like, I'm almost a bit not gutted, but like, I would have wanted to be there for you that time to help with that. And same way with me, whenever I'm going through difficult things, I've got a great group of friends I can call on and speak to about these things. Even through challenge I face through training, the team I work with, Adrian, my physio, Tommy, my coach, Harvey, my other coach, I speak to them on a continuous ongoing basis whenever I feel a bit down or shit about myself, which happens when you train with these things because you're managing fatigue, you're managing training load. There's so many elements to it. And actually sometimes you feel like your performance is getting worse and worse and worse because your fatigue in your system's getting higher and higher and higher. And actually it's, speaking to them about it, like they've pulled me through a lot this training block where I've not felt great. I felt awful. I've not been sleeping well. My energy level's been through the floor. I've been eating more and still not feeling well. I'm trying to sleep more, not feeling well still. And then actually they're like, no, like this is prepping you for the challenge. Like there's a reason why there's so much volume right here. It's so you get used to feeling with this low energy and then still doing it anyway. Like almost like it's okay. That's been huge because, again, that's why having a network, having a team of people like that is so helpful for getting through this because there have been times I've gone, I must be like really ill. It's not, I'm just really fatigued.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because your kind of first 3 years of my Movember challenges, 2018, 2019, 2020, the sort of three big ones that I needed a break from because it was so all-consuming. It actually ironically started to affect my mental well-being at the back end because of the things you just mentioned in terms of training and the fatigue. And I think that was where I realised I'd maybe crossed the threshold where it was not... The message that I was wanting to put out there had been somewhat clouded by the fact that I was losing myself a little bit along the way. Ticked all the boxes that I wanted. Very, very proud of the impact that occurred, raised over £100,000, very, very pleased with it all, but found it quite entertaining that by willingly putting myself into this position of suffering, I'd ironically upset the balance of my own mental health again. But in the process, learned a lot of things about how I can, one, manage myself better with my own mental well-being, having not been good at doing that in the past. And then number two, like you said, being in that privileged position to be able to be relied upon by people around you if they are ever struggling. Because I think we are slightly moving in a different direction to a lot of the narrative of the past couple of years, where I think the silent ego of social media, the maybe more self-driven attitude that's come post-pandemic, people are looking out for themselves a little bit, rightly so, in many ways. I feel like there's been a little bit of a move away from some of the progress that we made a couple of years ago in terms of narrative, especially amongst men, on relying on the people around you and trying to suffer through things alone. So I know you've spoken about it in the past with the challenges that you face and why these things are important to you, but what is the message that you want in general terms to come across? Because I know Scrambled Legs is all about community from a run club point of view. I know that the challenges are all about community from a interaction point of view. I know that a lot of the social media stuff is about bringing people together through running or helping them reduce that entry point so they can discover the things that you've discovered. But given that you're a good friend, given you've got good friends, there are people out there that might not see themselves in that position, and that's where things can get really challenging, having felt like I'm in that position in the past. So for anyone that is listening that feels like they're a little bit lost, might not have anyone to rely on, or might even be asking the question of themselves, am I somebody that can be relied upon? What are the things that you've found have developed you on both sides of that coin the most over the years?
I think the biggest thing has been being a good friend. If you want a good friend, you've got to be a good friend. It's all well and good saying, "Oh, I want like a great group of friends." It requires effort. It requires work put in there, and also just showing up for other people. You know, my best mate, he ran his first marathon last year in Copenhagen. I just got back from a race in America, and my jet lag was through the roof. I think I had about 2 hours sleep. I had to get Mars on a plane, go to Copenhagen, not to run, just to support him running his first marathon. And I remember I was reflecting that time. I was like, this is. I mean, part of me was thinking this is the last thing I want to do. I've just run a 50-mile mountain race. I'm really tired. But I was like, no, it's important to show up for these things. And, you know, I said I was going to be there. I'm there. And that was a great weekend. I enjoyed it so much. I mean, I slept most of it, but I was up for the race. I was there for that. But it's a big thing for me was you've got to show up. If you want people to show up for you, you've got to show up for them. And it's a two-way street. So if you're struggling with that in your life, you know, the people that you care about, the people that are in your life, that maybe you don't have as many, do what you can with the people you've got around you. Support them, whatever their challenge they're facing. Be there for them, be present for them, and focus on ways you can support other people. It comes back in many different ways over periods of time. And that's a huge one there, because again, the things you want other people to do for you, you need to be able to do for other people as well. So it's a two-way street. It's not just a case of, oh, I want these things. Like, okay, are you someone who gives those things? Same way with anything in a relationship. You know, people say like, oh, I want this in a partner, this in a partner, this in a partner. It's like, well, are you those things to other people? If you're not, you're probably not going to find them in other people. You know, and that comes to elements of internal work, you know, focusing on yourself, focusing on how you show up for your friends and people in your life. It's important. And I think we can all always look at adjusting that or improving that. Something that I've massively improved on the last 5-6 years of my life is, you know, what is the quality of life you want to have? Okay, well, you've got to put that out to the world. You've got to show up for the people doing that. And same way with these challenges here. I mean, I've definitely taken more from my friends this last year than I've given. I'm aware of that, because these big challenges take a lot out of you. You know, it reduces your capacity to offer much of yourself. You have to be, there's an element of selfishness within that. And so, because this is it's not a permanent thing of every year doing some sort of big challenge, because otherwise you run out of challenges to do. And also you run out of steam yourself. Like, if you're always giving everything you've got to your own challenges, you need to have something back to give to the people around you as well. So I think there's, you know, if anyone who's struggling with that at the moment, I think the biggest thing to do is look at the people who you have in your life who are there, and how can you show up better for them? And in turn, over time, they will show up for you.
How did you manage your mental well-being before discovering running during the pandemic versus now? Because I know that you've learned a lot of lessons through this journey that you've been on, but we all develop and evolve as human beings. Mm-hmm. And I can imagine running taught you an awful lot, but what was it like pre-pandemic? Could you rely on exercise to support your own mental health, or did you struggle with that a little bit more? I definitely struggled a lot more.
I think it was more exercise was not as big a priority. It was, okay, yeah, I train here and there, and it's, you know, I was still playing rugby, and it was a part of what I did, but it was never the priority. I never really prioritized my training. I think if I was going through tough patches, I would distract myself. A lot of going out, and like, you know, I've got a lot of friends on all sides of the spectrum. Friends who love going out, who out 2-3 nights a week. I've got other friends who don't drink, and I still see all of them in that sense there. But I think when I was going through, anytime I'd face challenges, I would fill up with distractions, which is very easy to do, especially in a city like London. You know, it's so easy to get yourself distracted, taking up your time doing whatever you wanted to do. But when I think throughout COVID was such a reset for not just me, but a lot of people found it as a reset of, okay, let's start now. Can't go out, can't go to the pub on a Friday night. What are we going to do instead? And actually, I think that's where a lot of people found, especially endurance training, because gyms were closed. So people had running and they had a bike. Kind of it, really. So I think a lot of people found love for their endurance training at the time. Because also the other thing we had was a lot more free time. You know, endurance training, as you get better at it, becomes more and more time consuming. You know, gym, realistically, after 5-6 hours a week, you can't really add more. It's very highly diminishing returns. Whereas with endurance training, you have to continuously increase that amount of time spent to see improvement. So I think that's where a lot of people found endurance training. I know it was the first time in years I'd had time to go, well, okay, I've got 3 hours free today. Let's go run for an hour and a half, or maybe 2 hours, or jump on the bike for a couple of hours. Before then, it would be like, okay, I've got an hour to get a workout in the gym.
Yeah, tick the box, move on.
Tick the box, move on. Maybe something a bit more high intensity. But, you know, zone 2, I only don't know what zone 2 was in about 2019. So, yeah, I think since that period, and then, you know, allows you to, I think with endurance training it requires so much planning and organization, and just through, as a byproduct of getting into it, you then have to organize other elements of your life and plan accordingly. So like for me now, Sunday evening is like planning at what time throughout the week, I'm going to do this session, this session, this session. It then kind of force you to be organised on the parts of your life. Okay, cool. Well, I was supposed to be seeing so and so this day. Okay, well, let's actually like, when am I seeing that person that day? What and it asks a level of discipline of your time that often I never used to have before.
Yeah,
I think that because otherwise, if you don't plan something properly, it often doesn't get done. Especially with the training, unless that's like, this is happening on this day, at this time, this is the thing here, it can often get brushed on the carpet.
I think the best thing of whatever it is, 5-6 hours a week in the gym, training for something mad, training for your first 5K, whatever it is, the sheer act of committing to it and getting some skin in the game is one of the most powerful things you can do for your day-to-day, because it forces you to stress test your systems, assess your priorities, look at how you structure your week, look at your commute, look at where you spend your time, look at where your gym membership is, look at how you allocate social time. And it makes you ask questions. What do I want to be doing? What should I be doing? And actually, what shouldn't I be doing? And then from there, you can allocate time accordingly, recalibrate, go through another evolution and recalibrate as you go. And I've learned more about myself and what's best for me on a day-to-day basis through continued reps in different disciplines over time. That's maybe much more effective overall. So I've kind of accelerated my self-development in many ways and just made myself a much more efficient human being by continuously committing to another intimidating, to me, important thing to mention, relative term, challenge, event, whatever you want to call it. And I think that's where, you'll be a different man come the back end of this training prep, I'm sure.
100%. I think the biggest thing this last 6 months is the amount of no's I've had to say to things. And that's not for good and for bad. So it's nice I can just say, I'm training for this thing at the moment, I can't really commit to this and this. The other side of that is there are things I would have quite liked to do these last 6 months that I haven't been able to do, like go on holidays, travel with mates. I've had to say no to a lot of fun things for the sake of, I need to get more rest in, I need to get more recovery in. If I'm not hitting 9 hours of sleep at the moment, I'm feeling it the next day.
Yeah.
So that means I can't, anything going on, it's like an automatic no, which is okay for a period of time. It's not the status quo. We're only here for a short amount of time in life. We need to enjoy ourselves as much as it is to push ourselves. It can't all be that David Goggins-esque, going hard all the time. No, like life is a balancing act, and life is immensely more enjoyable with other people in your life. And if you just say no to everyone all the time, eventually you get to a point where no one wants to invite you to anything or do anything with you because you're always spending your time running or training for this thing. There's got to be, as you talk about, balancing the scales there. That's in multiple different areas of life. And then there's going to be periods of the year where I'm training for events, training for things, but also I think it's okay to have like an off season in that sense. There, doing this in a non-professional setting means that it's very tempting, especially in social media, to go from challenge to event to challenge to event, challenge to event, without realizing, hang on a minute, like I've now just spent a year or 2 years only training for things, only doing this. I mean, the longest period of time I took off from training was post-challenge last year. I've pretty much 3 months of just relaxed training as and when I felt good. And that was a nice reset, because the first 6 weeks post-challenge, I felt just awful the whole time. And I tried to get back into the running, going from running 572k over 10 days to then going, it took me months to build up to a 10k again, because my body was shot and I felt tired, I was fatigued. I also there wasn't a purpose behind it. It wasn't enjoying it, running for the sake of running, rather than going, I'm running for the purpose of enjoying this run. And that's why I gave a bit of time before going, right, what's something I want to do next? So I left a little bit of time. I ran a 70k in January just for a bit of fun. Wasn't going for like a specific time. It was just a case of like, loads of my friends in Run Club, we're all going to run the 70k. Let's run it together. It'll be a bit of a laugh. And it was a laugh. It was something to have an element of like structured training around over the Christmas period, which I think is really important. Christmas is an easy way to, I
always inbuild my downtime around that as best I can.
Yeah.
Because my birthday's December. So it always comes as sort of a real allocated
yeah.
over-index on social interaction and catching
100%.
up with people and family, which I really enjoy. But it does mean that when you couple that with January weather up where we are, because Scotland most of the time is not sunshine, haggis, and what was the third component? Whiskey. Fuck. And Iron Brew. We had Iron Brew on our run. We're missing a few components here,
We didn't
Johnny.
have whiskey or haggis, but we had Iron Brew. And
we need some Wreck the Hoose juice, some Buckfast to make things. We did see a guy that was stopping us driving forwards with a bottle of Bucky in his carrier bag, actually, so that's close enough. But I think the other thing I want to focus on is you've done a lot of things along the way, whether it's through run clubs or whether it's through some of the campaigns you've done in different parts of the world recently, on helping people run the furthest they've ever run, or understanding the journey that an individual has been through when it comes to pushing their boundaries with running. Running's it's a skill, People often forget that. It is a skill, but it's a low entry skill. It's a motor pattern that most of us have available, something that can be refined. But the beauty of it is it's very accessible to most people if they're able-bodied. So with that in mind, you've obviously got your own opinions and your own inputs on what helped you personally through running. But from the conversations you've had with others at Scrambled Legs, or from the stuff you've done over in Europe with helping people run the furthest they've ever run recently, what are the threads of DNA? Is everything? Is there a consistent narrative? Does everybody get different value from the distances? What do you think the essence of running further than you've run before is, in terms of having a positive impact on someone?
I think the most important factor is anytime you run a new furthest distance. I remember the first time I ran a 5K, 10K, half marathon, ultra. There was the same correlation of feeling across the whole board, which is I'm a little bit scared. I'm a little bit scared because this is unknown territory. Same way I'm feeling now. I'm about to go into a challenge that's unknown territory. I haven't done this before. There's an element of fear involved with that, but fear coupled with a bit of excitement. If I was going to this from like running casual 5 and 10Ks, going, right, I'm going to go run 900K over these, like that's massively out there. And there's very little excitement and massive amounts of fear. I think there's going to be that perfect coupling of excitement and fear. I think if the fear is far greater than the excitement, it might be a case that it's very far out the comfort zone. But I think for meeting people who've, running their first marathon, ultra, whatever it is, and it's that next step into it, I think that's where a lot of people get the most personally out of it, because it's stepping out your comfort zone, but it's also just, it's a little bit into the unknown. It's not completely into the unknown, but it's a little bit into the unknown. And there's an element of overcoming that fear, which gives a massive return on the flip side of that. I think there's got to be something in it for you doing it. So for a bit of context, recently I ran in 4 days, 7 different cities around Europe, taking people on running their furthest new distance. So range from 11Ks to 26Ks, and we crammed 7 cities in 4 days. So I got to meet some awesome people who'd never ran that distance before, and basically ran with them until we got to their distance, which was so much fun. But the biggest thing I saw was the first part of it, getting up to wherever they'd run before, was great, really enjoyable. And then obviously seeing people go this new step beyond this further distance was a real special privilege to be involved with. Because again, these people, a lot of them were they were all the same thing, all a little bit nervous to do it. And, you can see the level of excitement in their faces. And there was an element of struggling there too, because, sometimes because of the nature of traveling around Europe at these times, we're running at quite hot parts of the day in quite warm places like Barcelona, Spain, Barcelona, Madrid, Germany had a bit of a heat wave at the time. So, it was enjoyable to be a part of that, but at the same time, it was special to actually see that, because I think sometimes we're so obsessed with our own goals, our own progress. Actually recognizing progress on other people and seeing them going through that process is a really special thing to see and be a part of. So I think there's, for anyone who's, again, coming down to the question of pushing themselves, progressing, finding something that excites you but also scares you, I think it's really important, because that element of fear is definitely something that can help push you forward into that. I think if it's too big of a step and it's pure just fear, there's very little excitement into that. I think that's that maybe a little bit too far area. But like everything is, it's a systematic approach, and it's step by step by step by step, rather than going, right, what's the biggest thing I can think of doing? Eventually you get to those big things. What I'm doing now would have the old me terrified.
What about the new you? What's intimidating you about what's coming up?
It still intimidates me. I think the intimidating factor is just if anything, is actually the logistical side. I feel like it's just, always say, like, it's time and feet. Just keep, as long as you keep moving forward, you eventually get to the where you're going. The big issue is, like, from a logistics standpoint, it's as you say, stress testing the logistic element of what we're about to do, and that's something that's really,
you can't dry run it. That's the challenge, isn't it? You can't do a practice 940k.
No,
940k.
No, that's it. So it's an element of like, okay, how is this going to work here? And I think there's stuff which is going to work out of the way, and there's also having faith. The team we'll work with on this, same team as last year, they're great. They're awesome. They're fully invested into it and making this work. And so I think for me, it's like actually realizing, where there will be things that arise, there'll be challenges, there will be fuck ups. It's okay, like, it happens. I remember it happened last year, the day one of the Tube Challenge. I'm sure he won't mind me saying this, Mike, who's probably listened to this one. My videographer, he'd just flown back in the day before he was best man at his mate's wedding in Portugal. So he'd flown in, he was very tired, and we got picked up at 4:30 in the morning. We were halfway across London to get to the top of the Northern Line. He opens his camera bag and realised he doesn't have his camera. Which is...
I thought you were going to say an SD card or something.
No. The really obvious thing.
Camera.
He'd
Right.
actually forgotten to put his... I think he'd taken his camera out to charge. And we left so early, he'd literally just rolled out of bed, jumped the Uber. It was this moment of like, we haven't even started yet. I actually found it quite funny, to be fair. I was like, I'm glad we're getting this out of the way now, rather than, midway through it. And it was fine. We just
don't do it again.
Just don't do it again. But no, it's how you deal with cock-ups are always going to happen. And as well, it's also a case of like, okay, it's happened. It's not the end of the world. It just means we're going to start an hour later. Cool, let's go back, let's grab it. Let's just, start there. So it's not, again, there's always going to be cock-ups happen, but it's how they're dealt with, how they're managed. And just not, I
think that's one of the best things to come out of events like this is if you don't, again, key detail, willingly put yourself into the opportunity to be punched in the face by life, which happens quite regularly. If you actively walk towards that and take the punches a little bit through big events like this, or again, it could just be running to the end of the lamppost at the end of the road. If that's what it is for you currently in your current situation, it doesn't matter. The scale is different for everyone. But once you expose yourself to more variables and go wrong, things will inevitably go wrong.
Yep.
It's the whole reason that I sort of needed a long break from riding my bike outdoors after the double brutal, because all of the admin around every week being like, right, fucking spare tubeless this, I need to back up this, where are my tyre levers, I've got that, oh yeah, I forgot that I crashed last week, which means that very specific bike part that hasn't arrived yet means that I need to duct tape my wiring to my bike. Okay, I'm going to be on my own for 8 hours, so I need to get stuff here, I need to stop at this, just all of that stuff. But all of those variables where my whole weekend revolved around it, which means that I can be quite objective when an email comes that wasn't the answer I was expecting, or I get a phone call that pisses me off, or something goes south. I'm much, much better at removing the emotion from that, like you will have been when Mike forgot his camera. Yeah. There's nothing you can do in that moment other than laugh about it. And if you don't have that ability, you're going to make things worse.
He's already forgotten it. It's not, he can't now magically appear. It's already happened. There's no point in getting upset or pissy about it. Like, okay, we need the camera to start. We need to film the start. Like, it's quite a fundamentally important part of this. And also, we can't just go, let's just go to the start and like film it on the phone. It's like, it was a 75k day. And the next time we're near where Mike lives is at the end of the day. So it's like, okay, let's just go back and get it. It's fine. And it wasn't a problem there. I think, again, just yeah, it was funny. To be fair to him, he didn't forget his camera again. But no, it's one of those things. Like, the fuck up's going to happen, and there are some things that are within your control, some things that are not within your control. Again, and generally speaking, there is often a way to deal with things. There's often something that can come out of it. And actually, so what? We started out late. It wasn't as if there was loads of people at the start line waiting for this, press there. It was just us there at the start line, the first station. So it was the only time we were working on was our own. So it's fine there.
There is a bit of a division forming, or whether I'm just seeing it a little bit by being in the space, between avid, really, really bought in historical runners, athletics clubs, and the evolution of running in London more specifically than anywhere else, I'd say with the size and scale of the run club that you've got, with the size and scale of the challenges that you've got, I know you haven't come up against much of it, but I think you probably will this time with the PR reach that's coming.
Yeah.
Whereby there are people that are frustrated at the visibility that recreational running is getting versus the reduced visibility that higher performance running is getting. We can probably look at the reasons for that in terms of accessibility and commerciality and just mass numbers and things, which kind of all seem quite logical. But I am always very disappointed when I see these comments or have these conversations with people that don't see the value in encouraging more people to try something new who could then eventually become the level that they perceive themselves to be.
For sure.
So what is your take on the current evolution of running? Are there any negatives? Or do you think that more people doing it is only going to evolve into better downstream results?
I think 100% the more people doing it, the more people getting into running is only a net positive for the sport. Doesn't mean there's not negatives along the way. There's a net positive. It's great for the sport. Look at the growth in the sport, the growth in race applications. There's even races that a few years ago like would never sell out are now doing things on a ballot. That's a massive sign increase in running. You look at how many applications, 850,000 applications for London Marathon this year. Last year was 500,000. There's now an extra 300,000 applications. I thought running was big last year.
With triathlon on the decline, important caveat as well. So running's on the up and triathlon participation's on the decline.
I think with that one must be down to like accessibility and cost of living. I mean, I think looking at the price of bikes, I was having to think the other day, I was like, this is a seriously expensive sport. And again, you don't have to go down the route of super expensive, but just with running, you need a pair of running shoes.
Yep.
You can make do without everything else. You don't need a watch. You don't need a heart rate monitor. They're helpful. They're useful. You don't need a pair of sunglasses, like running sunglasses. You can use any sunglasses. And again, like everything else is an added bonus. With cycling, you need a bike. There's no way about it. Bikes aren't cheap. They're specialist bits of equipment. They are not cheap. And especially, there's almost like a minimum requirement level of good enough bike to do serious mileage on. So I appreciate that. With regards to the negative side of the running, I get it when there are people who dedicate their entire lives to a sport, who have competed at the highest levels, who aren't getting the exact same exposure or commercial offerings from where newer runners are coming to the space. I completely understand that. I think we're in an era now where if you look at any professional athlete, it's not just about their achievements, it's also about their reach. Same with, you look at musicians these days. I was sort of seeing something on this, like a lot of labels now won't sign musicians unless they have a big following already, because they don't want to do the effort of getting your name out there. They would like it if you've already picked up that.
Well, there's a much easier route now, isn't there? Which is if you can get your song trending on TikTok or in Reels, then the work's done for you.
100%.
I mean, Lewis Capaldi, the mastermind, but yeah,
exactly the same thing. So I think it's really interesting to look at that, because again, it's the thing about running is it's always been a sport on merit. Who wins this race, who achieves this, and that's shifted. But that's not just running. That's the whole ecosystem of sports, of media. That's just how there's been this massive shift away from traditional media, TV, film, and into social media, for good and for bad. There's always going to be negatives alongside of that. I think then you have almost like a lot of people are willing to put themselves in places where my biggest gripe is actually when you have people who gain a lot of attraction on social media, but are willing to promote things that maybe aren't the reason why they got there, or they're willing to tell a different story as to how that. So people who promote things that really don't make much of a difference when it comes to their performance, because there's a healthy commercial side to that. So that's my main thing, is people who promote X, Y, and Z supplement or whatever it is, that with sole purpose of financial gain, and not, does this actually help people? I think with the amount of money in social media these days, that's, especially in things like the supplement world, that's why I try and avoid supplement partnerships, just because there isn't that much of a difference most supplements make, whereas the great supplements are sleep and nutrition. And so for me, it's people will overemphasize these small little details because they pay the most, rather than going, hang on a minute, this is actually what you need. When I first got into really pushing myself with endurance sports, I was under the impression that the most important things were certain supplements, or not getting really good sleep or consistent sleep. The best investment I've made this last year is in an air conditioning unit for my bedroom, so my bedroom's cooler, not a million and one supplements that potentially could have this, so that aren't very, very well researched. I think that's my biggest area of concern is within that space. But
focusing on the grains of sand at the top of the pyramid before you've built the base is kind of the thing that I see in London more than anywhere else. Is there's a I mean, again, colourful, pretty shoes, absolutely fine. People can do whatever they want, but I think buying a pair of Alpha Flies without having committed to a structured training plan, if you're buying them because they look great, that's absolutely fine. But in terms of the cost versus utility versus input equation, it doesn't quite balance out.
Yeah,
people can do what they want, but I think there's a big. You said it earlier. My take on that is that people have just started taking themselves a bit too seriously with it all, and no one cares. Unless you're a professional, where you're actually measured in an arena where people do care. But your mum and you are the only people that should really care.
Yeah.
If other people do turn out to care, that's a huge bonus. But if you're not doing it to please yourself and please your mum, then you're probably doing it for the wrong reasons.
100%. It should all come down to the self. Am I proud of the effort I've given? And that's it. I think with the problem, the other issue with social media is people get so hung up on worrying about their times at races, especially marathon times. People feel like they're on show the entire time. Yeah. And actually, it's okay to have a bad race. It's okay to be ill on race day. You may have trained 16 weeks or something and you get sick. Okay, cool. No one really cares that much. No. You care the most about these things. But I think sometimes people can go, well, I've shared this journey on social media. I've talked about this, and actually that has an impact and effect on them. The reality is that you're the only person who should really care about your own times. And as long as you've tried your best, that's what matters.
And as we've already said, things will go wrong.
Oh yeah, 100%. I think, but the biggest message for me is always, other people's opinions shouldn't carry as much weight as your own when it comes to how you view yourself. And at the end of the day, if you've tried your best at something, that's the only thing you can ask for. The actual end result isn't that important. In reality, when you try your best and you commit to something, you generally go through a bit of a state of change yourself when you commit that hard to something. So realistically, the result doesn't really matter that much. End of the day, unless you're winning these races, it really doesn't matter that much. And actually, as long as you've done yourself proud and you push yourself hard and you can look back and be like, yeah, I was really proud of the work I put into doing this. Okay, maybe I didn't get the exact result I want. Okay, maybe look at why. But the why could be down to a million other things outside of your control. The amount of times I've trained for X race to run X time, and then race day comes and it's 8 degrees hotter than I thought it was going to be, and plans are out the window. All you can do at that point is do your best. That's it. And now, generally speaking, if you've tried your hardest and tried your best, you shouldn't really be disappointed in the outcome, because you've given what you can.
Best example for me that I'm recalling immediately is the 500 pound deadlift and mile under 5 minutes in October last year. There's nowhere to hide in a mile. Whether you've given it your all. Jamie, for example, ran 4:49 this week on Monday, and he looked far too fresh at the end. So he's been a little bit frustrated this week. He was like, I think I had a bit more in the tank. But I knew 500 pound deadlift moved. It was a little bit more windy on the day than I would have liked, but I was doing it in October. In terms of variables control, that's a risk. You can't deny that. And toppled myself over the line at 5:05, inclusive of the deadlift. So the mile time was it was 4:59 on my watch. And that was that. Fallen short of the goal that I set myself. But I was lying on the floor, about to throw up, massive headache, rolling around like a limp fish. And I thought, you know what? That was all that was on the table.
That's there.
Happy days. I kind of left thinking, this is quite nice.
Yep.
I'm not punishing myself. I'm not actually that gutted, because I gave all I did. And whilst it was documented online, and there'll be a couple of people go, didn't quite make it, did you? Then no, I didn't. But I worked very hard for it. Fell a little bit short. And actually, we're about to go into winter in the UK, so got to knock this one on the head for a while. Those are the objective measurements. And I think a few years ago, I probably would have been a little bit more, bloody hell, this, that, and the other, looking at all these things and all the thing. Oh, yeah, the wind, I would have had it if it wasn't for the wind and all this sort of stuff. But it's you control the variables of the inputs and what you do. Could I have moved it a week? Probably not, because I had support from people that were going to be there on the day. So it was like, right, off we go. It's windy. I think the science does seem to indicate that a headwind takes more from you than a tailwind gives you on the track. So I was thinking about that a lot as I was warming up. But I was just really pleased with myself that even that evening, even in the moment immediately, I was just pleased that the process was over, because I couldn't really hack much more track training at that pace anymore. So I think it's a skill. All these things are a skill. I think that's what's important is do the reps. Mark Beaumont, I spoke about this with somebody yesterday. Mark Beaumont, one of the things that he said when he was on the podcast that stood out to me, again, nobody can question Mark Beaumont's credibility and experience when it comes to this stuff, is that people are focusing on selling the story before they've got the experience, or something to that effect, which was that he chipped away for years and years and years to build his CV and experience to then document it on a BBC level. Obviously, it's much easier to access a lot more people through the virality that can come from TikTok and Reels and things these days. Yeah. And then you build the experience that means that you can put yourself in the position to sort of roll with the punches. You've done the reps at that point, whereas that's flipped a little bit in the other way around this in the modern world. Yeah. Which means that I think, like you've said, people might go into things a little bit naively, or put a little bit too much pressure on themselves to perform in a certain way when they might have no right to, because social media is presenting this person that's a similar age to me doing a similar job is doing this, therefore I'm capable of that. But you might not know that they spent 6 years playing semi-professional football back home before moving to London to work as an accountant, whatever it might be. And that's why context is absolutely king. And I think individual focus, skin in the game for something you genuinely care about is what's most important.
For sure. And it's not holding yourself, your achievements or your efforts up to other people's efforts. And again, social media is inherently comparison. It's for those making content, for those consuming content, it's very easy to get caught into the rim of that. And to be fair, I did a panel talk a few weeks ago, and some guy was talking on it, talked about how he said he struggles to not compare his life, his goals, his performances with the us on the panel. And at the time, I was really struggling. I was going through a bout of fatigue that was keeping me in bed for days at a time. And I was like, to be fair, I'm not really showing that really the negative side of how things are going a bit there. So I was like, there is an element of that where no matter what, everyone's got to pay a price for something. You want to be training 20 hours a week? Okay, well, you're going to be exhausted for the other times you're not training. You're also going to have to spend a ridiculous amount of money on food. And you're probably not going to have much energy to be a good friend or partner or whatever it is. And so I think with social media, I think traditionally you'd see that in athletes. Yeah, they would their life that's shown by social media, traditional media would kind of include that. But I think social media is kind of like, because of that element of competition, people are trying to almost compete with each other for views in a sense. There, people are trying to show the best life that they can sort of put forward in that sense. There, I think it's important. Again, like, people share their highlights on social media. Because a lot of the time, most people's lives aren't interesting. I would even say my life's not that interesting. I do share elements of my life through social media, especially through my training side of things, which I think is one of the more interesting sides of me. The rest of my time is spent, working, making content, which is inherently actually quite a boring thing.
Yeah, it's very binary, isn't it? Yeah.
Very binary, writing out video ideas, creative concepts, testing them, editing stuff. Like, it's not that interesting. Going to bed at 9 o'clock isn't the sexiest thing in the world. So no, there are, huge elements of that. But I think, it's a change. And the good thing about social media is I think people's attitudes on social media do change quite fast as well. I think people are starting to catch on to things. Audiences on social media are a lot smarter than they were a couple of years ago. So actually now I think people are viewers have a lot more nous to them and can understand things a lot faster, and also aren't as easily deceived by people portraying a lifestyle but maybe not backing it up. But going back to your point where with Mark Beaumont, someone who, I don't know, was cycled around the world twice.
Yeah.
Once self-supported, once.
He had the North Coast 500 record until quite recently, I believe.
Yeah.
I think it was beaten by another Scot.
Another Scot.
We don't like doing things far from home, do we?
Mark Beaumont, it's a good example. I remember watching the BBC when I was 18. I watched his BBC series came out, and he was someone who massively inspired me. But then again, he was cycling the width of the United Kingdom when he was like 12.
He was. His CV is ridiculous.
Yeah.
It all blends into one. It might well have been 12 years old.
Yeah.
He did. Yeah, but it was essentially it's just so much that led to all that. And again, it's like you first knew him for cycling around the world, and you're like, oh, he's the guy cycling around the world, not the guy that did all of this before cycling around the world.
100%. I think that's a really important caveat, because again, but I even go back to last year before I ran the London Underground. I'd gone in. I'd before I made a single piece of content around running. I'd spent 3 years consistently running, training, building up marathons. But when there were no marathon events on, I just run casual marathons for fun with friends to really start building in. Because part of me was like, I feel it would be a bit ironic, someone who doesn't know much about running or endurance training, to start making content on running and endurance training. And even though I've trained my entire life, I still felt I was a bit unqualified to necessarily do so. I can always share about my experiences, but actually, that's what I always, even now, I still try and avoid giving advice, because I feel like I'm not a coach. I'm not going to give out coaching advice, because there are great coaches out there who do give out good coaching advice, and it almost detracts from the work and efforts that they put forward. So again, same reason that, I think it's important to have a good CV behind that backs it up. So if anyone can ever say anything like, oh, here's this person's like, well, here's what I was doing 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and it's like a long build up of work and consistency before it became anything of a, in the public eye.
Yeah, I think what's cool about that as well, if you start tomorrow, and then buy into that process, it's how quickly all that time can develop, and you can become unrecognizable.
The time's going to pass anyway.
Exactly. So you might as well, rather than thinking, oh well, it'll take me 6 years to get to the point where I've got the ability to do X, Y, and Z at a moment's notice.
Yeah.
In 6 years' time, you could have no ability to do anything at a moment's notice if you don't start tomorrow. I think that's what's really exciting. I mean, what I'm so grateful for is the sort of range of sports that I had playing growing up, which gave me access to lots of different skills and understanding how my body works, focused on powerlifting for many, many years, then focused on the charity fundraising stuff, which brought my aerobic base right up. Injury then led me to triathlons, and then that's kind of all what's happened following. But I'm so pleased that I had that 6 to 8 years of really focused strength work with some athletic work focused in, because it was all superficial, low touch skill maintenance alongside real top end strength development that now means that I'm like, oh, what the fuck would I be doing? I wouldn't be able to enjoy all this stuff now if I hadn't done that long committed process. And like you said, you played sport growing up. A lot of people that are into recreational sport these days played sport growing up. Some people didn't, and I think that's even better that they're now discovering these things, because it's much more intimidating to access 100%. Recreational stuff.
I mean, I was nervous to try different sports when I'd come from a sporting background, let alone I can imagine how, if I've never played a sport before or never done much sport before getting into it, I would find that the most fascinating people are people who get in, pick up running, pick up cycling later on in life, who don't come from a sporting background.
Yep.
I actually find that because it's such a late starting point, but it takes so much more courage, I think, to step into the arena where they're going, you know what, I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to try to do this thing, and knowing that it's factors more difficult. I always say I was struggling when I first started running, but I could sprint really well. I could play rugby at a decent level. I'd always played sport throughout most of my life. So just changing that into a bit more endurance took a lot of effort. But if my starting point was I'd never done any sport before, never done any strength training before, to really then go into it, that would take so much more effort and courage to step out there. Because whenever we try anything new, we always worry that people are looking at us trying. I remember when I first started running, I was a bit embarrassed because I was like, I don't actually know how to run at a slow pace. I know good sprint dynamics, but how do you actually jog? Like, what is the process?
6'4", you stand out as the ent running down the street.
Yeah.
He doesn't know how to run. Is probably what was going through your head.
100%.
Your head popping up above everyone else.
I would run at night time so people couldn't see me because I was a bit embarrassed about that. But again, that's how I felt coming from a sporting background, let alone how someone might feel who's never done that before. I think that takes a lot of bravery, and anyone who draws on the stand says, you know what, I'm going to give this a go. It's great. And one thing you realise when you start going to the gym, because I know people talk about getting gym anxiety or run anxiety, where they're so worried about what other people who are in there as well think of them. Everyone's thinking about themselves.
Yeah.
No one's really watching. People may see you and glance over at you, and then they'll carry on with what they're doing because they don't really care. But when you're new to a place, that's your immediate reaction is, oh God, these people are gonna know I don't know what I'm doing. It's like.
But again, going back to everything we discussed, you mentioned that one of the biggest value metrics that came from having people run their furthest distance ever that you were a part of was confronting and overcoming that fear. But fear is an ascending scale. And if fear round one is overcoming that anxiety and putting yourself into the environment, that's a huge win.
Huge.
And doing that repetitively, getting the reps in, week 1, week 2, week 3, you then might do a full session. You then might do a full week of training. And then before you know it, you're unrecognizable. You've developed as a person. You've got a way of having black and white trackable metrics out with a work environment. Your skill acquisition's increased. And you're like, oh, you know what? This isn't as bad as I thought it would be. Because it's so difficult to understand how to move and interact with your body if you haven't had access to that. And I can't imagine there's anything more intimidating than a group of people that do have that understanding that you try and insert yourself into, which down here in major cities all over the world, that's a huge part of social interaction in the modern world because people are drinking less, people are finding new ways to meet people, and the anxiety that goes with general social life coupled with a sort of performance or physical anxiety is intensifying all of these things that we have to deal with as day-to-day human beings all over the world. So I think really reminding yourself that everybody's got their own stuff going on, everybody's worrying about themselves. There will be a glance, but that's all it'll be.
Yeah.
And there's actually access to a whole lot of information out there so that you can upskill yourself without even needing to put yourself in that arena, so that when you do tackle that fear and dive in head first, you'll be much better off for it.
100%.
So what do you want people to do, other than donate money, of course, as a result of the challenge coming up? What do you want the impact to be at an individual level for people that are engaging with it?
I think anyone who's going through tough times, who are feeling down about themselves, who are feeling lonely, who maybe aren't where they want to be in life, can realise that actually these are the challenges I'm facing aren't permanent. The challenges and difficulties I'm facing right now are not going to last. And that actually there is support out there, there's help out there. And that whether they're facing challenges on their own, no one is ever truly alone. There's always people out there who want to help, who want to see you succeed. And knowing that, the tough times we face in life are not permanent. We can come through these things. I think it's a really important factor to people to understand, because it may feel like in the moment when you're going through a tough time, fuck this. And then they may think this is life from now on. This is really, really crap. And you know what? I'd rather not deal with this than have this continue on. I think that's a big challenge, especially look at the rates of suicide in the UK now. If you look at youth suicide in the UK now, that is the highest it has ever been. So what is the kind of world where young people are growing up in these days where they feel that life is better if it just finishes? That for me is a really striking issue right now, and I think it's one of the most important issues of we're facing in time. I speak to a lot of young people through running through the stuff I'm doing, and more and more young people I know someone who's taken their own life. I remember when I grew up, I didn't know anyone who'd taken their own life. That's really, for me, that's a really dramatic difference between when I was their age as opposed to now. So I think for me, the biggest takeaway is that life has a way of improving as long as you can find some ways of enjoying it, find some ways of carrying through. The tough times in life will generally fade. Every awful moment in my life has passed and good things have come. Doesn't feel like that in the moment. So the biggest takeaway I think for anyone who's listening to this would be, if you are going through an awful patch of life, just understand that it does get better. Might get worse in the short term, but it will eventually get better. And actually, those difficult moments in life do have a tendency to pass us by eventually.
September the 12th, kick off.
Edinburgh.
What can people do? Where can they be?
At 6 a.m. September the 12th. Join us in Edinburgh for the first part. So,
and then updates on socials for every other city.
Every other city updates and socials. So we should be in Belfast by the 14th, Dublin 15th, Cardiff 18th, 19th, London 21st. So yeah, updates through social media. Join me in any. You have more welcome to join me in any city or anywhere you find me along the way. There'll be live tracking. But yeah,
but look after yourself.
Look after. Most important thing is look after. Yeah, is to look after yourself in that one there. If you do want to join me, make sure it's at a safe location. Maybe not on a B road in Scotland. There's be plenty of opportunity for that. But if you want to get involved, want to support the challenge, the charity, donation links in the bio. But also, if you want to just share about it, I understand money's tight for a lot of people. Absolutely fine as well. Appreciate any support on that one.
Fantastic. Thank you again, sir.
Awesome. Thank you very much.